My parents skipped my wedding because I married before my perfect sister now. Their perfect family image is finally falling apart. I grew up in the shadow of my older sister Anna. To everyone who met her, she was the embodiment of perfection, straight A student, prom queen, and later, a successful corporate lawyer. My parents adored her, often using her achievements as a yardstick to measure my worth. I didn't resent her, not entirely. How could I? Anna had never been cruel to me, she simply excelled at everything. It was my parents who made it clear that I was the lesser sibling. While Anna's success was celebrated with elaborate family dinners and endless praise, my own accomplishments, small as they might have been, were barely acknowledged. When I got a scholarship to study art, my father called it a hobby rather than a career. My mother suggested I follow Anna's footsteps and go into law instead. Still, I persevered, carving out a path for myself. It wasn't easy, but I learned to find joy in the little victories, even if no one else did. Anna's engagement only amplified the pedestal she was on. Her fiancé, a charming and wealthy surgeon, fit seamlessly into my parents' vision of the perfect family. Their excitement was palpable. My mother practically lived on Pinterest, planning the dream wedding. I was happy for Anna but couldn't help feeling like a guest in my own family story. Little did I know, my decision to marry before her would unravel the entire façade. Jake was everything my parents despised. He wasn't a lawyer, doctor, or engineer. He wasn't even college educated. He owned a small but thriving carpentry business, and had an easy charm that made everyone else feel at ease, everyone except my parents. We met at a local art fair, where he had a booth selling hand-carved furniture. His passion for his craft mirrored my love for painting, and we hit it off instantly. Our relationship grew quickly, fueled by shared dreams and mutual support. For the first time I felt truly seen and valued. Jake encouraged my art, and even built me a custom easel for my studio. He didn't care that I wasn't Anna. To him I was enough. When he proposed 6 months into our relationship, I didn't hesitate to say yes. Breaking the news to my parents was a different story. Their initial reaction was lukewarm at best. My mother asked if I was pregnant, as though that were the only plausible reason I'd marry so soon. My father made a sarcastic comment about Jake's income. Despite their disapproval, I refused to let their negativity cloud my happiness. Jake and I set a date, determined to build our life together on our terms. Jake and I decided on a small, intimate ceremony in the countryside, surrounded by friends and a few supportive relatives. We kept it simple, no elaborate venues or fancy catering. Just the people who mattered most. Invitations were sent out, including ones to my parents and Anna. I knew they disapproved, but I held on to a sliver of hope that they'd show up anyway. On the morning of the wedding, my phone buzzed with a message from my mother. It was short and impersonal. "We won't be attending. Good luck." No explanation, no apology. Just a cold dismissal of the most important day of my life. Anna, ever the diplomat, called later to explain. "You know how they are," she said, as though that excused their behavior. She promised to make it up to me. But her absence stung just as much. Despite their rejection, the day was magical. Jake's family welcomed me with open arms, and our friends filled the air with laughter and love. As I walked down the aisle, hand in hand with Jake, I realized I didn't need their approval to be happy. Still, a part of me couldn't help but wonder what it would take for my parents to see me as worthy of their love. After the wedding, Jake and I settled into married life, a whirlwind of love and adventure. We spent our honeymoon road tripping along the coast, exploring hidden beaches and charming small towns. Every moment felt surreal, like I'd stepped into a painting more vibrant than anything I'd ever created. Jake's unwavering support gave me the courage to dive deeper into my art. Back home, I threw myself into a new series of paintings, inspired by our travels. Jake proudly hung my works in his shop, where they caught the attention of his customers. Slowly but surely I began selling pieces. For the first time I felt like I was carving out a space where I truly belonged, a life far removed from the judgment and expectations of my parents. But the joy was bittersweet. Every so often I'd catch myself wondering if my parents ever regretted skipping the wedding. When I sent them photos, they went unanswered. Jake urged me to let it go, but the ache of their absence lingered like a bruise. It wasn't about needing their approval anymore. It was about wanting to share my happiness with the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Anna's engagement party was a spectacle, the kind of event you'd see in a glossy magazine. My parents spared no expense, renting out a lavish ballroom and catering from a Michelin-starred restaurant. The guest list read like a who's who of their social circle: doctors, lawyers, and business moguls. Jake and I were invited, though the invitation felt more like an obligation than a gesture of goodwill. Walking into that ballroom felt like stepping into a different world. The air buzzed with polite conversations and clinking champagne glasses. My parents greeted Jake with strained smiles, their disapproval thinly veiled. My father made a pointed remark about the modesty of our wedding, while my mother barely acknowledged me, too busy fawning over Anna's diamond ring. Anna, to her credit, was kind and gracious. She pulled me aside at one point to apologize for our parents' behavior, but her words felt hollow. I realized then that Anna was as much a pawn in their game as I was. They'd built her up to be perfect, but it was a perfection designed to serve their image, not her happiness. The realization stung, but it also gave me a strange sense of solidarity with her. It didn't take long for whispers to start circulating about Anna's fiancé Marcus. At first they were harmless rumors, claims that he was arrogant or too controlling. But as the months passed, the stories grew darker. A family friend confided in me that Marcus had a reputation for being temperamental, even cruel. Anna, ever the peacemaker, brushed off the concerns with a smile, insisting Marcus was just under stress. When I brought it up to my parents, they dismissed my worries outright. "Don't be jealous," my mother snapped. "Anna knows what she's doing." It wasn't jealousy, it was genuine concern. Anna had always been poised and confident, but lately she seemed subdued, her laughter more strained than genuine. Jake urged me to keep my distance. "They've made their choice," he said, wrapping his arm around me. "You don't have to fix it for them." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. For all their talk of a perfect family, my parents seemed blind to the cracks forming in their golden image. Thanksgiving was the first time the entire family gathered since my wedding, and the tension was palpable. My parents insisted on hosting, determined to put on their usual show of familial harmony. The table was set with their finest china, the centerpiece an elaborate floral arrangement that screamed perfection. But beneath the surface, things were far from idyllic. Marcus dominated the conversation, cutting off anyone who dared to speak for too long. He made snide remarks about Jake's profession, thinly veiled as jokes, and my father laughed along as if they were old pals. Anna sat silently, pushing food around her plate. When I asked if she was okay, she forced a smile and changed the subject. The breaking point came when Marcus criticized one of my paintings, displayed in the living room at Anna's request. "It's nice," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "For amateur work." Jake's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, respecting my parents' home. I, however, couldn't hold back. "At least I create something real," I shot back. The room fell silent, the weight of unspoken truths hanging heavy in the air. The Thanksgiving dinner ended abruptly after my outburst. My mother hurried to smooth things over, insisting I apologize to Marcus for my rudeness, but I refused. Jake and I left soon after, the atmosphere too toxic to endure any longer. On the drive home, he reassured me that standing up for myself had been the right thing to do. "You don't owe them your silence," he said, squeezing my hand. In the following weeks, I didn't hear from my parents. Anna texted me, apologizing for Marcus's behavior and begging me not to hold it against her. She admitted he could be difficult but insisted he was under a lot of pressure at work. Her excuses felt hollow, a reflection of the pressure she must felt to maintain the perfect image our parents expected. Despite her words, I couldn't shake the feeling that Anna was trapped in a relationship that mirrored our parents' control. I wanted to help her, but I also knew she had to recognize the cracks for herself. For the first time, I began to see that my distance from the family wasn't just a source of pain, it was a shield protecting me from their toxicity. A month after Thanksgiving, Anna showed up unannounced at my door. Her usually pristine appearance was replaced by red-rimmed eyes and a shaky demeanor. Jake immediately offered her tea and gave us space to talk. As soon as we were alone, she broke down, confessing that her relationship with Marcus wasn't what it seemed. "He's controlling," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "He criticizes everything I do, and when I stand up for myself, he gets angry." She didn't elaborate, but the fear in her eyes spoke volumes. I felt a surge of anger, not at her, but at my parents, who had turned a blind eye to her suffering to preserve their perfect family narrative. I urged Anna to stay with us for a while, but she hesitated. "I can't," she said. "Mom and Dad would never forgive me if I left him." Her words broke my heart. The same parents who had dismissed me so easily had conditioned her to believe that their approval was worth sacrificing her happiness. All I could do was assure her that our door was always open. Jake, ever the problem solver, refused to let the issue rest. "She needs to see what a healthy relationship looks like," he said. Over the next few weeks, we made a point of including Anna in our lives. She joined us for dinners, game nights, and even one of Jake's work projects, where she helped paint a mural for a local community center. Slowly, Anna began to open up. She laughed more, her smiles genuine instead of forced. She confided in me about the pressure she felt to live up to our parents' expectations, and admitted that she'd envied my courage to marry for love rather than approval. It was a bittersweet revelation, but it brought us closer than we'd ever been. Our parents, however, were less thrilled. When they found out Anna had been spending time with us, my mother called to lecture me about interfering. She insisted that Marcus was just stressed and that I should stop trying to turn Anna against him. It was a painful reminder of how deep their denial ran. But for the first time, I felt hopeful that Anna was beginning to see the truth. The breaking point came at Anna's engagement party. Marcus, emboldened by an audience, belittled her in front of everyone, accusing her of mishandling some minor detail of the event. The room went silent as Anna's face turned pale. For a moment it looked like she might apologize, but instead she did something none of us expected. She walked out. I followed her to the parking lot, where she was pacing, her hands shaking. "I can't do this anymore," she said, tears streaming down her face. It was the first time I'd seen her truly vulnerable, and it broke my heart. She admitted that Marcus's behavior had been escalating, and that she'd felt trapped, too scared to leave because of what our parents might think. I hugged her, reassuring her that she didn't have to go through it alone. "You're stronger than you think," I told her. "And you don't owe anyone your misery, not Marcus, not Mom and Dad." That night, Anna called off the engagement, sparking a chain reaction that would unravel the carefully constructed facade of our family. My parents were livid when they found out about the broken engagement. They called me the next day, accusing me of poisoning Anna against Marcus. My mother cried about how this would embarrass them in front of their friends, while my father lectured me about how I'd ruined Anna's future. Their words stung, but I refused to back down. Anna, to her credit, stood by her decision. She moved into a small apartment and began attending therapy, something I'd suggested after seeing how much it had helped me in the past. Despite their anger, our parents tried to maintain the illusion of control, spinning the story to their friends that Anna had ended things amicably with Marcus because of scheduling conflicts. The more they tried to salvage their image, the more apparent it became that the cracks were widening. Relatives began questioning their version of events, and friends noticed Anna's absence from family gatherings. For the first time, the perfect family they'd curated so carefully was showing its imperfections. Anna's journey toward independence was both inspiring and heartbreaking to witness. For years she had been trapped in the web of our parents' expectations, but now, she was finally learning to live for herself. She threw herself into her work, started reconnecting with old friends, and even joined a local yoga class. Every step forward was a small victory, and I was proud to see her finding her footing. But it wasn't easy. Our parents' constant meddling weighed heavily on her. They insisted on visiting her apartment and announced, bringing gifts like self-help books and thinly veiled lectures about her wasted potential. At one point, my mother suggested that Anna should reconcile with Marcus, claiming he was willing to work on things. Anna shut it down immediately, but the pressure left her shaken. Through it all, Jake and I stood by her. She became a regular fixture in our home, joining us for dinners and helping Jake with his projects. For the first time, she was able to laugh without the weight of judgment hanging over her. It was a slow process, but Anna was beginning to rediscover who she was outside the shadow of perfection our parents had cast. The growing divide between Anna and our parents began to ripple through the rest of the family. Relatives who had always taken my parents' side started questioning their narrative. Some were sympathetic to Anna's situation, while others believed our parents' claims that I had manipulated her. Family gatherings became tense, with whispered conversations and awkward silences whenever Anna's name was mentioned. One particular incident at a cousin's wedding underscored how fractured things had become. My mother loudly lamented Anna's rebellious phase during dinner, blaming me for encouraging her. When I calmly defended Anna's right to make her own choices, my father exploded, accusing me of tearing the family apart. Jake, ever the peacemaker, stepped in and suggested we leave before things escalated further. The incident solidified what I'd suspected for a while: our family wasn't just fractured, it was broken. My parents' obsession with maintaining their image had alienated not just Anna and me but also other relatives, who were beginning to see through their facade. The perfect family they had worked so hard to build was crumbling, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. Anna's therapy sessions began to unearth painful memories of her childhood, memories she had buried to survive. She shared with me how our parents had constantly pressured her to be the best at everything, punishing her with silent treatment or guilt trips if she fell short. I didn't realize how much of my life wasn't mine, she admitted one evening, tears glistening in her eyes. One of the most cathartic moments came when Anna decided to confront our parents. She invited them to her apartment, prepared to lay everything out on the table. Jake and I were on standby, ready to support her if things went south. The confrontation was tense, filled with accusations, denials, and tears. My father dismissed her concerns as overreactions, while my mother blamed me for putting ideas in her head. But Anna stood her ground. For the first time, she told them that their need for control had cost her happiness. She told them about Marcus's behavior and how their insistence on perfection had blinded them to her suffering. "I'm done living for you," she said firmly. The conversation ended with my parents storming out. But Anna felt lighter, as though she had finally reclaimed her voice. Word of the family drama began to spread within our parents' social circle. Despite their best efforts to control the narrative, people started piecing together the truth. Marcus's reputation took a hit when stories of his behavior reached mutual acquaintances, further undermining my parents' claims that Anna had made a mistake by leaving him. For the first time, my parents found themselves on the defensive. Friends who had once admired their perfect family began to distance themselves, unwilling to be associated with the unfolding scandal. My mother took it the hardest, retreating into herself and lashing out at anyone who dared question her. My father, ever the stoic, doubled down on his belief that Anna and I were the problem. Anna, however, began to find support in unexpected places. Extended family members who had previously kept their distance reached out, offering words of encouragement. One aunt even admitted she had always felt sorry for Anna, seeing the immense pressure she was under. These connections became a lifeline, reminding Anna and me that we weren't as alone as we'd once believed. As the months passed, the concept of family began to shift for both Anna and me. It was no longer defined by blood but by the people who showed up, who cared without conditions. For Anna, that meant building a circle of supportive friends and leaning on Jake and me. For me, it meant letting go of the hope that my parents would ever change. Jake and I decided to host a small dinner party for the people who had supported us through the turmoil. Anna came, bringing a new friend she'd met at yoga class. The evening was filled with laughter and warmth, a stark contrast to the cold, tense gatherings of our childhood. For the first time, I felt like we were creating the kind of family we'd always wanted but never had. Our parents, of course, were not invited. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was a necessary one. The peace we felt in their absence was a reminder that sometimes the healthiest choice is to walk away from toxic relationships, even if those relationships are with your own family. The unraveling of their perfect family image hit my mother the hardest. She became consumed with maintaining the illusion, despite the clear cracks that everyone could see. My father had always been the more stoic of the two, but my mother thrived on her status within their social circle. Losing control over Anna and me wasn't just a personal failure to her, it was a public humiliation. One day she showed up at my door, unannounced and visibly distraught. "Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" she demanded, her voice trembling. She ranted about how her friends were gossiping, how Marcus's family was blaming her for the engagement falling apart, and how Anna was ruining her future. It was the first time I saw her façade completely collapse. I stayed calm, explaining that Anna and I weren't responsible for their unhappiness. "You built this image, Mom, and now you're realizing it wasn't sustainable," I said gently. She didn't want to hear it. She stormed out, slamming the door behind her, leaving me with the sinking realization that she might never see the damage her expectations had caused. Anna's decision to move on from Marcus wasn't just about leaving him. It was about reclaiming her life. She began exploring hobbies she'd always wanted to try but had been too afraid to pursue. She signed up for photography classes, joined a hiking group, and even started volunteering at a local animal shelter. Every step she took toward independence felt like a victory. She also started dating again, though cautiously. Her experiences with Marcus had left scars, but therapy helped her rebuild her confidence. When she introduced us to her new boyfriend, Matt, it was clear how different he was from Marcus. He was kind, attentive, and supportive of Anna's ambitions. "He's not perfect," she said with a smile, "but he's real." For the first time, Anna seemed genuinely happy. Seeing her thrive was bittersweet. I was proud of her. But it was hard not to think about how much sooner she might have found this happiness, if not for the years of pressure and control. Still, I reminded myself that the past couldn't be changed, only learned from. As Anna and I grew closer, our relationship with our parents continued to deteriorate. They couldn't accept that Anna was thriving without their guidance, or that I had built a life of my own outside their influence. Every interaction with them became a power struggle, filled with guilt trips and accusations. At one point my father suggested a family meeting to resolve things. Jake and I agreed to attend, but it quickly became clear that their version of resolution meant us apologizing and falling back into line. When Anna refused to attend, my father accused her of being selfish, which only deepened the divide. The meeting ended in a stalemate. My parents left angry and frustrated, while Jake and I felt more resolved than ever to protect the boundaries we'd set. "You can't fix people who don't want to change," Jake reminded me. It was a hard truth to accept, but one that brought a sense of peace. The final blow to my parents' carefully crafted image came from an unexpected source. Marcus, still bitter about the broken engagement, began sharing details about his relationship with Anna. He didn't intend to make himself look bad, but his stories painted a clear picture of his controlling behavior. Word spread quickly through our parents' social circle. Friends who had once admired their family began to distance themselves. The gossip became impossible to ignore, and my parents' attempts to spin the story only made them look more desperate. For the first time, their perfect family image was completely shattered. Anna, meanwhile, remained steadfast. She refused to let the gossip affect her, focusing instead on her new life. "Let them talk," she said one evening. "I know the truth, and that's all that matters." Her strength inspired me, reminding me that we didn't owe anyone an explanation for our choices. With our parents' influence fading, Anna and I began redefining what family meant to us. We started hosting regular dinners with close friends and supportive relatives, creating a community that felt more like family than the one we were born into. Our parents, however, were conspicuously absent from these gatherings. They remained distant, clinging to the remnants of their old life. Occasionally my mother would send passive-aggressive texts or leave voicemails about how we were tearing the family apart. But we didn't engage. The boundaries we'd set were firm, and for the first time, we felt free. Anna's happiness became a source of healing for both of us. Watching her thrive reminded me that we had both escaped the toxicity that once defined our lives. It wasn't easy, but we were finally building the kind of family we'd always wanted, a family rooted in love, support, and authenticity. In the months that followed, our parents' world grew increasingly insular. With their social circle shrinking and their reputation in tatters, they seemed to retreat into denial. My mother doubled down on her insistence that Anna and I were to blame for the family's problems, while my father refused to acknowledge any fault at all. Then came the unexpected: a letter from my mother. It was handwritten, pages long, and filled with emotions she rarely expressed. She blamed us, yes, but she also admitted feeling lost and overwhelmed. "I don't know who we are without this family," she wrote, a haunting acknowledgement of how much of her identity was tied to the image they had created. I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to bridge the gap, but another part knew it wasn't my responsibility to fix what they'd broken. I shared the letter with Anna, who encouraged me to take my time. "You've always been the strong one," she said, "but that doesn't mean you have to carry their guilt." Anna's growth became a beacon of hope for both of us. She landed a new job at a nonprofit she was passionate about, combining her love for photography with community outreach. Matt proposed to her in a quiet, heartfelt moment during one of their hikes, and this time, Anna was ready. She said yes without hesitation, confident in her choice. Our parents, predictably, were not invited to the small, intimate wedding. Anna wanted the day to be about love and joy, free from judgment or drama. Instead, she invited close friends, supportive family members, and of course Jake and me. Watching her walk down the aisle, radiating happiness, was a moment I would treasure forever. After the ceremony, Anna pulled me aside. "You've been my rock through all of this," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "I don't think I would have had the courage to start over without you." Her words meant everything to me, a reminder that even in the face of pain and loss, we'd found something beautiful each other. The final chapter of this story wasn't one of reconciliation but of acceptance. Instead, they remained in their bubble, clinging to a version of the past that no longer existed. Anna and I, however, had moved on. We continued to build the lives we wanted, surrounded by people who loved us unconditionally. Our small chosen family became a source of strength, proving that family isn't about perfection, it's about connection, support, and authenticity. On a quiet evening, as Jake and I sat on our porch watching the sunset, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared, but it had faded into the background, replaced by gratitude for the present. Anna and I had survived the storm, and in doing so we'd discovered something far more valuable than the illusion of perfection. We'd found freedom.